Returning to the sample database, if I press Apple W for word processor window, you instantly see word processor information, and I can now scroll or page through this file just as if I was in the word processor. I'm still in the database though, so I can't edit the information, I can simply view it. However, it's a very handy reference. Another way of accessing the word processor information is through the backwards apostrophe, sometimes known as the Open Apple tick command, the key just underneath the tilde. Pressing Open Apple tick on the if category instantly places us in the word processor at the if information, if being a command or a function in the database. We can now scroll through the information in that word processor file which applies specifically to the if command. Now if I press Escape and press Apple W, you see again I'm at the beginning of the file and I can scroll through the whole thing. We can page through it, press Apple 1, Apple 9, move around any way for instant access to the file. However, if we use the tick command, we're restricted to the information specifically about the current category. This gives us great flexibility in providing help information to a database, instructions, added information. For example, a teacher might keep a student record in the database. This would allow them to keep detailed disciplinary records which may be too long to fit into a database category and could go on for several paragraphs in the word processor file. Yet they would be instantly available at the touch of a key. Now that we've seen how the word processor window feature works, let's take a look at how it's defined. Moving into the word processor, we can zoom in and see that set marker now indicates that marker 150 is associated with the database. This separates the file into portions which apply to different categories in the database. For example, the if category, which we looked at with the Open Apple tick, begins right here. Set a marker 150, database, if. It matches the word if and displays that information up to the next set marker. Scrolling down through the file, we see there are no more markers, so the entire rest of the file is made available to the Apple tick command. If there was a marker inserted right here, for example, we would now have limited the command to scrolling to that point. We thus have great flexibility in how these word processor windows are viewed and defined. You've seen some of the useful features of the word processor window. It also has some more sophisticated features which are described in the manual, which allow it to find text anywhere in a document and display the information at the point which the text is found. For those power users who wish to learn more about this, see the manual section on word processor windows. The AppleWorks Word Processor Glossary feature allows us to import database information easily. This is probably most commonly going to be used for features like importing addresses, but it can be used to import almost anything you can think of that would be stored in a database file and needs to be quickly accessed by the word processor. This feature allows us to extract the information without needing to bother with a clipboard or any other method of transferring. Let's take a look at an example now. We have a database entitled Addresses, which contains several addresses using the person's first name, last name, their full name, the greeting, the address information, the city, state, and zip. What we're going to do is take this database information and format it in the word processor so that we can easily address letters. Let's move to the word processor now. Pressing Apple A for defining the definitions, we see that no glossary menus are currently defined. We press Return and enter in a title, Addresses. It now asks for the glossary file, so we press Return and select the Addresses file. We now need to define a list category. This is the information that will be displayed in a scrolling list for us to pick from. We want to display the name of the person, so we move down to Name and select that. We will not bother to plug in anything for the prefix text at this point, since we will simply use database information to define this template. Moving down to the number 4, Undefined, we press Return and select Name. After Name, you see the word None. This means that no keystrokes are currently defined to follow the information in the category Name. However, we would like to execute a carriage return to put the cursor on the next line for formatting, so pressing Return, prompts us to enter keystrokes for name. I press return and a token for return, familiar to Ultramacros users, appears on the screen. As you can see in the bottom line, we are supposed to press Open Apple Return to finish the definition. I will do that now, and you see the word return appearing next to name. Moving down to the next undefined category, we select that and choose company. Again, we need to add a carriage return after company before plugging in the address, so let's repeat the process you saw earlier. Press return, followed by Apple Return. Moving down to the next undefined category, we choose address 1. Again, we need to add a return. We repeat the process. Moving down yet again, we select address 2. One point here, if any of these categories, company, address 1, or address 2 is blank, it will be left out instead of leaving unsightly gaps in your definition. It will not be entered into the word processor at all. Pressing return for address 2, we add a return to that. Now we get to city. After selecting city, we do not want to do a return. We actually want to have some text after it, which would be a comma, followed by a space. Pressing Apple Return on that, we move down and select the next undefined category. Now we choose the state. After state, we use the common 2-space gap between that and the zip code. Hit the space bar twice, press Apple Return to end the definition, and finally move down and select the zip code. Let's examine the template again. First, we have the glossary file addresses. We are listing the category name, which is the combined first and last name. We have no prefix text, and we enter in the full address information followed by several formatted keystrokes. When we're completely done, press Escape. This moves us back to the glossary menu. You can see that we have one menu, the address is one defined. AppleWorks allows us to define 7 additional menus which can contain information for anything you would like to plug into a word processor. Also, at the bottom of the screen you see mail merge options. We'll address those later when we get to mail merge. For now, let's go back and see how our template works. Pressing Escape returns us to our empty word processor file. To access the glossary, simply press Open Apple G. Choose a glossary appears at the bottom. We currently only have one defined, so select addresses by pressing Return. It now lists the name categories that we defined earlier. We can cursor through these, select the one we want. Selecting my own name, press Return, and my address is entered in. Now that's appropriate, but if I want to start a letter, I might want to have Dear Randy or Dear so-and-so, whatever the case may be. Let's define that. Pressing Apple A. We go back to addresses, press Return, we're back in our menu definition. Let's move down here after zip and say, after zip, enter a carriage return to move to the next line, another one to leave a gap, and then Apple Return. Now the new category is going to be greeting. This is a category in the database which contains the formal way we wish to address the person. We're going to follow that with a comma and 2 carriage returns to begin our letter. Press Apple Return. Now we again escape to our file, and this time let's try a different name in the sample. We select addresses. This time we'll choose Quality President Joe Gleason. Pressing Return, you see Joe Gleason, Quality Computers, and President Gleason. Well, that's a bit stiff. Perhaps we should have it say Dear President Gleason. So let's go back and edit that. Press Apple A, return to the definition, and since the word Dear has to precede greeting, we have to put it on the category that's prior to greeting, which is zip. Press Return on the definition for zip. We have return, return, then the word Dear, a space, and it will then follow with the appropriate information. Let's return to our file.